What if I told you the greatest library in history was destroyed and that humanity has never recovered? It's me, and you're watching this channel. And today we're answering the extraordinary question: who burned the Library of Alexandria? When most people think of lost historical libraries, they probably have something like the destruction of the Library of Nineveh in mind. That's what we used to say when we had nothing better to do. But come on, it's not even the best library name. So let's talk about what some scholars consider the greatest loss in human history. Founded by Alexander the Great in the year 283 BC in the ancient Egyptian city of Alexandria, the Library of Alexandria was meant to be a one-stop shop for all of the world's knowledge. With its own museum and research facilities, the library aimed to gather every book in the known world, which at the time meant the Middle East, Greece, and Italy. By the year 220 BC, its collection had ballooned to over 400,000 scrolls encompassing everything from scientific treatises to poetry to philosophy. Today, that number might sound like a rounding error for the Library of Congress, but back then it was huge. There were multiple stories of bookshelves stacked floor to ceiling with thousands of years of collective human thought. Some works were well known, like those of Aristotle and Homer, while others were by unknown geniuses who history forgot. This wealth of knowledge was freely available to anyone who wanted to come and study it. But after several hundred years of relative peace and quiet, the library began to get a little dangerous to frequent. That danger would only increase until the entire place went up in flames. While no single account survives describing the burning of the library, we do have several ancient accounts describing various conflicts and disasters that may or may not have contributed to its destruction. To figure out who burned the library, if anyone, we're going to have to spend a few minutes talking about the many theories attempting to answer this question, so sit tight. One of the earliest and most persistent stories comes from the Roman general Julius Caesar, who according to legend may have accidentally torched part of the library during his civil war with Pompey in 48 BC. Plutarch describes Caesar marching his troops into the library and, having given orders to set fire to a siege engine, inadvertently setting the library ablaze instead. However, there's reason to doubt this story. First, Caesar didn't actually arrive in Alexandria until Pompey's fleet had already been defeated, meaning he wouldn't have been marching troops into town under siege. Second, there's another account of the event that claims Caesar ordered the building to be set on fire in order to keep Pompey's men from using it as a shield. Third, the so-called burning of Caesar's library is often depicted as an enormous disaster, but most scholars believe that the damage was limited to a relatively small portion of the collection. So if Caesar didn't burn it, then maybe it was the early Christians. In the 4th century AD, Christian writers began making repeated references to the pagan temple of Serapis, located next to the library, and how its destruction was a sign of God's favor. The most famous account comes from the soldier-turned-bishop Socrates, who wrote that Christians and pagans clashed over the Serapeum in Alexandria, and that the resulting violence spread to the library, destroying 40,000 volumes. There are a couple of problems with this theory, though. For starters, early Christians almost certainly did not set fire to the library on purpose. They weren't exactly known for their appreciation of literature. Furthermore, there's no non-Christian sources that corroborate this account. Also, it's a bit weird that Christians would attack the pagan temple of Serapis, but not the adjacent library itself. And lastly, the numbers don't really add up. The Serapeum was associated with Serapis, a syncretic deity combining elements of Hades, Osiris, and Apis, which made it pretty popular among pagans in Alexandria. To destroy such a prominent symbol of polytheism, the Christians would need a good reason and, perhaps more importantly, a very big match. And then there's the Muslim conqueror. As Muslim armies swept through Egypt in the year 640, the Coptic Christians of Alexandria offered fierce resistance. According to one account, a caliph named Amr ibn al-As besieged the city and laid siege to the temple of Serapis. When the citizens of Alexandria refused to surrender the temple, the Muslims set the nearby lighthouse ablaze, after which the city fell, and the remaining buildings were converted into mosques. The Great Library, however, is conspicuously missing from this story and virtually all other Muslim accounts of the conquest. It seems highly unlikely that Amr would have allowed such a vast storehouse of classical knowledge to be destroyed. After all, the Muslims had recently conquered the Sassanid Empire, largely to gain access to their superior libraries and universities. So why would they destroy their own prized possession? Well, one explanation comes from a Jewish historian named Solomon Bar Simpson, who claimed that the library burned down accidentally. Another explanation comes from a later Muslim source that blamed the Christians. Unfortunately, we can't stop here. Every possible culprit has a conflicting story about who actually started the fire. So ultimately, we may never know the true cause of the library's destruction. If you want my opinion, though, I think it's most likely that the library burned down slowly over time due to a series of different conflicts rather than all at once in a single devastating fire. But regardless of who did it, what did we lose? Some historians claim that the library contained the 7 ancient wonders of the world. This is almost certainly false, although it is true that the Colossus of Rhodes was housed in Alexandria at one point. Other historians speculate that the library was home to one or both of Archimedes' 2 lost works, the Atlas and the Method of Mechanical Theorems, which would have been huge losses for mathematics. Then there's the matter of the 40,000 volumes that were allegedly destroyed in the persecution of Christians, which could have included works by Sappho, Pindar, and perhaps even Homer, the presumed author of the Iliad and Odyssey. Finally, there's everything else: the inventions lost to time, the dead languages that died out, the unknown scientific breakthroughs that never saw the light of day. How much did we lose when the library burned? We may never know. But imagine if it survived. The world would look drastically different. The Renaissance would have happened much sooner. Classical science would have provided an even greater foundation for modern science. And who knows what other wonders we would have discovered. But luckily, we don't actually live in that world, and we have the opportunity to learn from its mistakes. While no single work matches the scope of the Library of Alexandria, we do have something to fill its shoes: the modern digital archive. In addition to safeguarding our existing knowledge, the Internet allows us to collect and preserve information in ways that were previously unimaginable. Perhaps one day, someone will build a new library to rival the original. But for now, the Internet will have to do. If there's one lesson that we can take away from the burning of the Library of Alexandria, it's that knowledge matters. Sometimes that knowledge can change the course of history, like when Gutenberg's printing press sparked the Renaissance and the Reformation. Sometimes it can help us understand ourselves and the world around us, like when Darwin's On the Origin of Species forced us to confront our place in the natural world. And sometimes it's just fun to know, like the fact that the great philosopher Aristotle believed that lightning was caused by an imbalance of the 4 humors. Curiosity is what drives us to seek knowledge in the first place. Preservation ensures that future generations can continue that pursuit. And learning, well, that's up to you. So thank you for coming to the library today and taking these ideas out into the world. It's thanks to viewers like you that this channel can continue to grow and thrive, which means that the cycle of curiosity, preservation, and learning can continue for years to come. In the meantime, though, we'd be remiss if we didn't mention that the library's website has a whole section devoted to the burning of the library, complete with helpful maps, timelines, and lists of suggested reading. So, be sure to check it out after this video. It's also worth mentioning that there's a lot of debate surrounding the idea of lost inventions. Take a look at this video for more information. Lastly, I'd like to thank our supporters for their continued support. And I'd like to give a special shout-out to today's patron cat of the day, Chester Cheese, for asking this excellent question. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe and leave us a like. And if you didn't, well, hey, at least you stopped by. And remember, dear viewers, whether you're conquering the world or the kingdom of Nirn, always bring a book.